Hello and welcome to a video that is not me walking from my car to my office in Denver Public Schools. It is rather a video that is talking through something that we are working on here in Personalized Professional Learning within Denver Public Schools. I am in my office and I'm about to take a look at a whiteboard that my colleague Jessica Raleigh, as well as a school-based colleague, Diana Solis from Collegiate Prep Academy. She is the teacher effectiveness coach over there, that we were working on last Friday. And I wanted to make sure that I captured all of the ideas from within this particular whiteboarding excursion before I erased it. And so hopefully you can follow the thinking a little bit. It will become more and more clear as we begin to develop it as a real thing. But it's a good idea to always sort of share your thinking and to talk about it with others in the hopes of being transparent and sharing my learning, sort of learning out loud. And if anybody wants to help support, or at the very least is going through the process on your own, that it might be a great way to collaborate. So to begin, this particular whiteboarding session was around the creation of a educator micro-credential, where a coach, someone who is working directly with teachers, would be able to support the reflective practice cycle to work on their instruction within their teaching practice, supporting that through the use of video. So video for reflective practice is the name of the game here. But we're talking about how do we create a micro-credential for that. So how do we certify or credential someone that has demonstrated their has demonstrated their learning, has demonstrated that they are able to coach someone and to support a teacher in the use of video for reflective practice. So that's where we're going to go here. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can actually see the board now. All right, so it starts with the reflective practice cycle, which we are labeling as for action, reflection for action, meaning the moment before you are actually doing your teaching practice. You are reflecting and talking about all the things that you would like to plan for, meaning what you want to capture, what you would like to do within the lesson, and that is sort of your planning conversation. So anybody that's done coaching, that's where we're going with that. It's for the action. And then we would proceed to reflection in action, where you're actually within the session, within the lesson. You were reflecting on the things that you wanted to capture and the things that you wanted to teach and to have students learn. And you're doing that reflection while you're in action in that practice. And then you proceed to reflection on action, where you are looking at your video, you're looking at your own practice and thinking back to it, and you are really focused on reflecting on what happened in order to improve your practice. And then obviously, based upon the things that you learn, that you have targeted and things like that, you come back to reflecting for action to do it all again. So that's the whole cycle. It's based upon a lot of research, but it was started in the 90s. And if you look up reflection for in and on action, you'll find the research. There's a really good article from, I think, 1991 where they outlined what it was in ASCD's resources. So if you look for that, and we can link to it in the description as well. But essentially, we are trying to answer this question. What do you want to isolate about your practice to improve it? What are you going to capture in order to be able to improve your own practice? And so with the coach, and with your capture of practice on video, you are able to isolate a particular component of your practice in order to improve it. With the idea in mind that this particular micro-credential, if you have demonstrated your expertise and you have evidence for having gone through this particular cycle, that you as the coach would earn that credential. But the teacher also has a micro-credential for this process of co-reflection, where you're reflecting together. And what's great is they have a companion micro-credential, a companion badge to this particular one. So there's a coaching badge that we're outlining here, as well as a teacher badge, a teacher micro-credentials. So I want to dig deeper into each one of these steps of the cycle, the 4 action steps, and we outlined questions that a coach would ask to a teacher within a conversation. And it's important to note that for each one of these, for action, in action, and on action, these are moves that a coach is making, but they're not the only moves. So we're not outlining what great coaching looks like. We're really outlining what it looks like to be a great coach through the use of video. So it's really specific and focused because we are not experts on, cognitive coaching or other models of coaching. We are really experts in making sure that the use of video is enhancing and supporting those great actions that you might be doing within a coaching conversation. So within the planning conversation, within the 4 action component, we would be asking questions as a coach like, how might you film, how might film help you and your students to grow? So really focus on how might the overall scope of recording help you and your students to grow. And then proceeding to what might you capture students doing or saying, really talking about the student actions. What might you capture in order to look at what students are doing and saying? What specific instructional strategies or moves would you want to capture? So thinking about the teacher actions. Which students might you hone in on in order to increase your understanding of the impact of your practice? So really looking at what are the individual students that you think you would want to really capture, and making sure that you are capturing just those students if you think they're going to bring about some really strong understanding of your own instructional practice. And then looking at when would it be best to capture, like what time of day, what part of the lesson, when would it be best to capture, and how might we capture practice in order to prepare for execution. This component is really thinking about the fact that we should role play within our coaching conversation. We should role play and actually capture this mini cycle. So meaning we should capture this particular coaching conversation, and we should role play and capture that in order to be prepared to execute during the lesson. And then we would really consider how might you use this video, the video of the preparation, the video of the 4 action meeting, in order to prepare for that execution. So how might you use this video to watch just prior to going into the classroom, or if there are any components that we might call out in the role play in this particular sort of practice session that would allow for better execution within the classroom environment, right? So that's the 4 action components, and there's a lot of coaching that's going on that's not specific to video, but these are some really strong questions that you can ask. During the in-action component, which is during a lesson, right? So this assumes that a coach is able to be present during a session. Otherwise, the teacher will be asking him or herself these questions. But in action, during the session, we ask ourselves things like, when will I turn on and off the camera as the coach, right? When will I capture or not capture what's going on? Okay, and then we come into questions like these ones. When should the camera be on the teacher? When should the camera be on the students? Am I capturing what we committed to? So am I capturing what I committed to in the 4 action conversation? Am I capturing that during the session itself? Okay. Who should have the wand? And this is specific to the use of a swivel. Some people call it a wand or a marker that they are capturing with. So who should have that wand and why? Meaning, who should the focus of the video be, and making sure that you're capturing the audio really well. That's a really strong component as well. And then what is the practice capture focus for the teachers and students today? So just making sure that you're really honing in on what you promised to capture over in the 4-action component, and really making sure that you have that level of focus. And then as a subset of that question, how will I adjust for the situation in the classroom? So based upon the overall focus, how will I adjust based upon what the students are doing or what the teacher is doing, so that I can better capture in order to have a great video for the on reflection component, okay? As a subset of this, there's a couple of questions that you might ask in between 4-action and in action, one of which is this squiggly line right here, where we ask, where might I place and move the camera throughout the lesson? So really intentionally thinking about between the time, or really throughout the lesson, where am I going to move the camera? So that might happen during the session, or it might more likely be something that you plan on based upon when you know a little bit more about what the individual lesson is going to be. Okay. Much like there are some things to consider in between the 4-action and in action, there are a couple of considerations between in action and on action when you're actually doing the reflecting upon the video and upon what the lesson actually was. And we identified a couple of questions here. What did you notice students doing or saying? And this assumes that you are watching the video. So without the coach, you are actually taking the video from the in-action portion. You're taking the video and you're actually watching it. So what did you notice students doing or saying without any particular guidance on what to look for? You're just asking teachers, what did you notice students doing or saying? So when the coach either sends the video or is alerted that the video is ready, if it's automatically being uploaded, you might ask the teacher to just take a look at it. What did you notice students doing or saying? And then you might ask, what did you notice about your own instructional moves? And what is the relationship between those two things? Between what students are doing and saying, your own instructional moves, and then the relationship between those two. Based upon what you did, what did the students do, right? Thinking about that relationship. So those are the 3 questions that you can ask yourself as a teacher, or that a coach would ask the teacher to consider prior to coming to the on action, or perhaps more realistically, just the reflection conversation, okay? During the reflection conversation or the on action conversation, we kind of ask these questions to teachers as a coach. How might you use this video to increase the reflective capacity of your students, right? How could you actually show this video to the students in order to increase their capacity for reflection? Okay, what did you actually capture? This is the meat of the matter here, all right? It's thinking about those things that you noticed about your capture, but most realistically, it's asking, what did you actually capture? The teacher moves, the student thinking, and the intentions of the students. If the students were bored, or they, had some specific inactions that might be speak to their intentions. The other components or the other questions that we would ask would be, how did what you captured compare to what you envisioned capturing? So based upon what you chose in the 4-action component, where you said, this is what I want to capture, what happened, right, that was different than what you envisioned, what you planned for within your lesson? Okay, that leads to a lot of really interesting conversations, because you're comparing what you planned for what actually happened. Okay, and then these last couple of questions are really valuable, but may need some additional refinement, because this one's a little bit long. Based upon what you saw students saying and doing, what might your next instructional moves be, and how do you want to capture the evidence of those moves? So thinking about your next capture, right? Going from your on action to the next 4-action conversation. If you are saying, based upon what you saw and what you saw students doing, your considering what your next instructional moves are, what your next experiments are, or your next really strong instructional practices are that will help support your growth. And then thinking about, are there other ways of capturing in action what those practices are? It's going to be really important to really consider that. And if you go ahead and do that, it's really important to focus on the evidence and making sure that not only are you preparing for those instructional moves, but that you're really focused on the evidence that you saw in the video that makes you think that those are the right instructional moves. All right, now this is a component here I put it in brackets, that we went back and forth on, but that I think is pretty important. So if the teacher does not notice things, so they didn't have time to actually notice things in the first viewing, then the coach can use that coaching role and say, if the coach notices something, let's watch the video and notice a student action or a teacher action. So the coach is actually saying, let's watch the video again, or for the first time if the teacher hasn't watched it yet, and talking about those student actions or teacher actions that could be a focus, rather than just sort of saying, all right, well, let's not look at anything in particular, let's just watch it, but really focusing on something that the coach would see that would have high instructional leverage. Okay, so those are all of the questions for this rather large cycle. And the most important thing that's going on here is that we're actually credentialing people to do this with teachers. We are actually looking for ways in which we might go through this cycle and credential people in the use of this cycle. So those are some initial thoughts. I'm going to turn the camera back around and just summarize here. All right, just to summarize, that's the reflective practice cycle that we're really trying to credential coaches to be able to do. And it's really going to be a strong focus of just having the evidence for being able to do that. So we were talking about the different pieces of evidence that you would collect. So they would be videos of each one of those components. So for action, in action, and on action, as well as any documentation that you might have for how you're working with the teacher and the other sort of coaching conversations that you're having with that teacher. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please do let us know. Otherwise, this is an important piece or an important artifact to help scope out our thinking a little bit. And definite thanks to Jessica Raleigh and Diana Solis from Collegiate Prep Academy. They are both incredibly amazing, and there's no way that we would have any of this thinking without them. So thanks for watching.